Okay, it's time, and let us start the session. I'm Ryusuke Masoka, a research principal with Fujitsu System Integration Laboratories, and I'm going to chair the session. First, some of the housekeeping notes. So the talk is TLP for white, and please mute your phones. Okay, it's time, and let us start the session. I'm Ryusuke Masoka, a research principal with Fujitsu System Integration Laboratories, and I don't know why this is happening.
Don't do as he does.
Oh, I don't know. I lost it. Your phones. Okay, it's time, and let us start the session. Okay, so and how far? Oh, so QA session after the talk. The microphone and there are standing microphones over there and over there. And is okay. And talk. I lost it.
No worries.
This is. Okay, so.
Should I take it from here?
Yeah. So title is Never Walk Alone, Inspirations from a Growing OWASP Project. And the speaker is Christian Folini.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Stage is yours.
Thank you for the intro, Ryu. So my name is Christian Folini. I'm a Swiss historian and security engineer. And we're going to talk about our open source web application firewall project called OWASP CRS, or the OWASP ModSecurity core rule set. We're a rules project about regular expressions to detect malicious HTTP traffic. If you came here for the regular expressions, then I have to disappoint you a bit, because this is a bit different. This is a talk about this XKCD cartoon. You've probably seen it before. It is about the infrastructure on the internet that ultimately rests on a single person maintaining a crucial library somewhere, maybe in Nebraska. And when I joined this project, together with some friends, we want to make sure from day one we're not the lone nut in Nebraska maintaining this for the rest of the internet. And what I'm going to talk to you about is the history of our projects and how we came along and the decisions we've made. So if you're an open source maintainer, it can be an inspiration for you what you could do to have a similar nicely working project, a growing, a flourishing project, meet people to join you. And if you're a user of open source software, an integrator perhaps, it can help you to share our perspective, to see the struggles we're having, the pain we're undergoing to maintain upstream for you. Good. So what is this? This, as I said, is a web application security project. It's 15 years old. There was an Israeli company breach that acquired the engine ModSecurity, an open source software, and they quickly realized they could not expect their customers to write these regular expressions themselves. It was much too complicated. So there was a real business need to develop a set of rules, core rules, so to say, they could ship together with their open source engine. That was the birth of our project 15 years ago. And it was made open source from the beginning, but it had a corporate roof over it. 2 or 3 years afterwards, the Israeli company was acquired by the much larger American company, and the guy running the show back in the day, Ryan Burnett, decided this was the perfect moment to take the open source rule set and move it out from the corporate roof under the roof of the OWASP Foundation. OWASP, like FIRST, is an American foundation, and OWASP has over 200 or 300 chapters around the globe and dozens of projects. You probably know OWASP from the OWASP Top 10. There is OWASP SAP, and OWASP CRS is another flagship project. So legally, we became independent. However, in reality, it was still mostly a one-man show driven by that American company maintaining it. So he was still working there, even though it was formally independent. The project died down in the following years. In 2015, Ryan Burnett quit, and his successor asked me and a friend to revive the project. But before we get there, I need to be closer to the clicker, yeah. So before we got there, Ryan Burnett also started an experiment. He had an idea of an experimental feature that is called anomaly scoring that is not quite obvious. When a web application firewall usually detects something, you would block immediately. But what he would do was separating the sensor from the blocking decision. This may A, sound very obvious, and B, what does it really give you? It gives you a lot of flexibility, namely doing the integration. So without going too much into technicalities, it is here to explain you, he had this idea and he was not seeing clearly where this was going. It was an experiment, but it proved promising, and over the years we grew with experience around this. And when we took over the project years later, we made this an essential features because by then we had understood how important this was. Very often that is not clear from the beginning, so this takes time to develop. Good. So eventually he moved away, the project died down, his successor asked me and a friend from the Netherlands back into the project, you guys want to revive this? And say, yeah, that would be interesting. It's a promising project. It has a lot of potential. Unfortunately, it died down, but let's give this a shot. And we immediately developed the vision. If we start over from scratch or revive this, bring this back to life, we need to have a common goal. The three of us need to have a goal where we want to go. And we defined usability, documentation, and the power of the rule set as the core essential we want to provide or improve. Usability, like ever so much software, the use case is good, but the ride for the user is very rocky. And back in the day, you could install ModSecurity, CRS on top, and your web application would immediately stop working. Everything was blocked, everything was on deny. You would have to work a lot until it was running again. And that ruined the whole customer experience, of course. So we wanted to improve that, and we achieved this relatively quickly with a much better usability, but it's still our number one priority to tune away false positive. False positive is that what makes the experience of a web application firewall very bad very often. Of course, documentation was lacking, so we had to improve that. We're still improving documentation as we move along. And then we wanted to make a powerful rule set, of course. Well, everybody would expect a web application firewall to be powerful and detect all the malicious traffic out there. But actually, that's not how the incentives really work, namely in the commercial market. So we defined this as a core goal, and we're still hunting after this, of course. It's always a rat race with the attackers, improving the rule set, improving as we move forward. Good. Disentanglement. When we revived the project, the guy, Sanders, from the American company, he quit his job as well. And instead of handing over the OWASP project to his successor at his job, he took it with him. So he moved away and he took the project because legally it was an OWASP Foundation project. And of course, the American company, they still treated it as their own, as if they owned it. And they had to be explained, no, you're no longer owning it. Actually, it has been given to OWASP 6-8 years ago. And now we're running on our own website, we run our own project, we welcome on our own developers, and you probably have to live with that. And they hated it, of course. That was not on their minds. But we thought it was time to walk in our own shoes, to do our own thing now. And but that moment, that freedom really allowed us to bring in new people into our project. I'm not saying that every open source project has to be free of corporate interest, not at all. But if you want to attract third-party developers, and that American company definitely did not provide enough developer power for us, you need to be at a certain distance from commercial interest, or people will volunteer to work for a commercial company for free, and that's not cutting it. I mean, nobody's interested to really do this. So we became an alternative for people, for security engineers, to their day job. In their day job, they had business need, there was schedule, there was roadmap, and all stuff, and people talking to them. And in their spare time, they could use their own skills, the same skill, to work as a volunteers on a very welcoming project, where they were allowed to experiment, to do the things they wanted to do at their day job but couldn't. So we became attractive as an alternative for the very same people. Good. Next one. We made a first release. We did release notes, we did a blog post, we explained everything on the mailing list, but then we also invested quite a bit of time actually into this release poster. So we had a professional graphical designer design this as a movie poster with the hope to make it known a bit, to go a bit viral, to put it up on Slashdot. Back in the day, Slashdot was a thing, and we actually hit Slashdot with that. And it was a lot of fun, and a lot of our users are still having this poster in their office. So that's cool, and from the beginning, this to say, we tried to make this fun, add a bit of twist, make it attractive, make it stand out a bit from the competition. Next one. This is a market scene from Kiev in Ukraine. I don't know if the market still exists. I certainly hope so. I have the photo here because of the apple and oranges. There are a lot of very similar looking apple and oranges here in this market. This could be GitHub. This could be a market like GitHub where a lot of projects, very interesting, nice, good-looking projects, are struggling for developers. As you will see, there are relatively few customers here. It's a developer market. There is a scarcity of developers volunteering to spend their time developing regular expressions. You find relatively few people willing to do this in their spare time because it's very boring. So there is a struggle to get these smart people to volunteer for your project. It's definitely a competition, and the developers have choice. If they have spare time to volunteer, to give to a project, there are many, many projects interested in them. So it is a real competition, and the developers are our most valuable assets that we have. Diversity. From the beginning, once we took over the project, we did the first release, we did the movie poster, we attracted more developers. We started to grow. We're up to 12, 14 active developers now, comparison to a single-man show on the corporate roof. We have very diverse backgrounds. We have a female CISO in our project. We have 2 guys running an ISP. We have a CTO from a larger ISP. We have several security engineers. We have people working in the public sector using our stuff. And I'm a consultant and teacher on web application firewall. And whenever we have a new problem, if a bypass hits us, if a security researcher shares information with us, we have very diverse approach to that, different perspectives. And this adds to our resilience because our team is so diverse, we come up with different potential solutions, very often complementary solutions. So this is really good. In contrast to the corporate setup where people are recruited by HR and they're much more alike in a typical corporate team, we're open and it's possible for us to be much more diverse. Admittedly, we're too much European, too much Western. We have a problem with Unicode and UTF-8, internationalization. Our engine is limited in this regard, and on top, we are limited in this regard, and our knowledge about this, our experience with that is limited in this regard, meaning we're letting Asian users down to quite a far extent. Having Asian people join a project would be beneficial. So this is a weak spot for us, despite the diversity that we actually have. Knowledge. We have an experience of over 100 years of operation with ModSecurity production. Very few organizations in the world have over 100 years of experience running a WAF in production. So we bring together a unique experience and unique backpack of pain running this in production because ModSecurity can be extremely painful, but it can also be very satisfactory when you know you've set this up in a clean way, customers are no longer affected by false positive, and you get a good night of sleep because you know you have a decent first line of defense in place. By now, all the big CDNs, all the cloud providers have a CRS offering. So they have all integrated our stuff, and we're kind of the dominant player in the market. We're the only open source offering, and the commercial ones in user base are much smaller than what OWASP CRS is. So we are kind of the go-to place for the open source WAF in the world. You have to formalize when you do a security project, any project perhaps, to a certain extent. You want to make sure you're not forgetting something. You need to have certain procedures in case, namely in times of a release. I mean, a release procedure, you have to think about all the steps that you need to do and sign the release binary in the end. But then all this formalization, these processes, is also killing innovation. Bureaucracy is the enemy of innovation. And innovation is what developers attract to our project. So the more we formalize, the more we take the breath away from the developers. So we have to strike a balance in here. We have to maintain decent procedures without boring people. And this is relatively difficult to do. In a corporate setting, you would say, look, you're paid to do this work, now do it. We go, you volunteer to do this work, you now do it, and then people wander off, because that's not what they want to do. So we try to formalize, but only just as little as necessary to get the job done. We try to organize this as a round table of people on eye level talking about technical discussions, a lot of technical discussions, obviously, and that allows for innovation, people bringing in your ideas. We handle a lot via chat. We have an agenda when we meet in chat, but outside of that agenda is like the dots that we're covering. It's completely free, and people bring in their ideas, and by the way, I want to try this out, be my guest. This is a green field, develop anything you want, and show it to us, and then we discuss it, whether we make it into mainline or not. We have a luxury of perfection. If you're in a corporate setting and you tell your boss, look, we've developed this twice already, and then we refactor it twice, but I honestly think we need to return to the same piece of code, and we need to write it from scratch again. And at a given moment, your boss will say, hey, hold on. This is good enough. This is at least a minimal viable product. Let's ship it and be done with it. This is not how we can operate. We have the luxury of polishing something as much as we want. If somebody from our developers tells us and say, hey, look, we need to redo this because it's still not the way it should be. This is not beautiful enough. This is not really aesthetic. It's still a bit of a hack. I don't like it. I have a bad feeling about this. Then yes, let's do this. We can allow our developers to do this because we don't really have business constraints. We want to ship. We want to do releases. We want to do releases in time. There are additional incentives, actually, so too many releases are not good for our customers. But compared to a commercial outfit, we have a lot of luxury that we can work on the same code base again and again. And it comes down to a lot to aesthetics, to have a clean code base, because a clean and beautiful code base is inviting for people to review it. If people are able to review it, we get security researchers to look at our rules. If security researchers are able to look at our rules, they will report their findings, and we can then improve. So this is all a very positive cycle. The refactoring and the polishing helps us to improve, and of course, finding vulnerabilities as we move along. Clicker is a bit, yeah. We have leadership. So we are the three of us running this project with 12, 14 people, talking to all the cloud providers by now. I made the contact with AWS today. So far, I never succeeded, but here at the conference, this works. So we're talking to Azure, AWS, Cloudflare, Akamai, Verizon Media, now Edgecast, and so on. And we're trying to run this project. It's all a hobby project. How can we run this project? One thing that I had to realize, I wrote the ModSecurity Handbook. I thought I had a certain idea how this works. But the longer this goes, the more I feel I'm the newbie here in the house. Because the new developers we're attracting, they're so smart and brilliant in their domain that I move back and go, hey, you guys are so good, I'm just a moderator here. And I think it's a natural role in an open source development, because as the leader, you cannot be a perfectionist. The moment you try to be a perfectionist in open source project, and you drive your volunteers to perfectionism, you drive them away. Because if they are not interested in the quality level you expect from them, you end up doing everything yourself. You try to drive them there, and then eventually they throw up and they walk out the door, and you have to do everything yourself, and you end up in Nebraska. We don't want to go there. It has to be the other way around. We need to be the liberal moderators, inviting the developers to be perfectionists themselves. They tell us when a pull request is ready and polished enough now to merge. They amongst themselves, they review each other and drive to perfection. And we can try kind of be a liberal. Hey, if you guys tell me this is good enough, then we're fine with it. This is good. This allows for an atmosphere where a newbie comes in and knows if I'm talking to the big leader in this project, these are nice people. They're liberal. They're open. They try to help me. They try to somebody to coach me to get my pull request to perfection. So this is working if we are liberal leaders. Swag. Many open source projects have their web shop somewhere. They try to sell hoodies and t-shirts and stickers. That's not working, honestly. It works for very few projects. Swag is cheap. It's distracting your developers. Somebody has to do the web shop. Somebody has to maintain it. Somebody has to come up with photos, whatever. We gave up on that completely. If somebody wants to do logo t-shirts, we have all the logos on GitHub. Print your own t-shirts, sell them if you want. We don't care. It's distracting, it's irrelevant for the project. What is much more interesting is sponsorship. Sponsorship is interesting because it's plannable, you can have a budget, and it's some serious money. Namely, if you're in position to talk to the big vendors, the big integrators. They make money of our stuff. So they kind of want to know to talk to us. You just need to find the right people. It's a sales process. But once you have found the right people, they're interested in the conversation. Because very often, the big integrators, they're not running the stuff themselves. They're selling it. They don't have 100 years of experience running our stuff. If they have serious questions, they want to talk to us. So we're entering in a very positive partnership situation. And we're interested in their experience, of course. We're interested in their feedback, what we should do, because we, again, are not necessarily talking to the end users. So a sponsorship relationship can be very beneficial. Apparently, you need to have the parameters right. But in our situation, this works really nicely. We took this into our hand a year or two ago, and now we attract $100,000 in sponsorship money annually. And you can get things done with that amount of money. Giving you one example, we're running a developer on duty program. That means if you hit our project on Twitter, Stack Overflow, Slack, mailing list, or GitHub with an issue, with a question, an entry-level question, we have a developer who's on duty to respond to you. And we kind of try to do this within 24 hours. So we have first-level support in place for free, sponsored by a sponsor. And that way, we can pay our developers a bit of money. You get $200 for being the developer on duty per week. And for some of our developers, that is substantial money. It's actually attractive, and it's good. And it's nice for an open source project to provide guaranteed support. Only possible thanks to sponsors. Retention. Developers' life continues. They get kids, they change their job, they change their focus, they wander off. It's the same problem in an enterprise. When you lose a developer, a key employee, you lose so much knowledge and experience. It walks out the door, and it's very hard to keep them back. And it's even harder for us because there is very little we can offer them outside of pain, sweat, and probably blood, and a lot of time spent on boring and regular expressions. So we need to make sure that we can retain them, and they feel at ease. They feel good volunteering the time. They feel good donating the time to our project without getting too much back. One thing that helps us is setting up personal ties, physical meetings, get to know each other, spending time outside GitHub together to retain them in the project because, again, developers are so valuable for our project. Quality assurance. I told you about the aesthetics of code that we really have in mind, that we want to have. So we want to have reviews. We want to be auditable in a sense. It should be accessible, the code base. And then we also remove a lot of stuff. we're in good position that our code base is relatively small. It's just a couple of regular expressions, a few hundred of regular expressions. And we try to remove them, make it even smaller, so it's easier to review, of course, but it's also reducing the attack surface overall. And this allows researchers, again, to review our code, so this all comes together in helping us maintain or raise the level of quality of our software that we deliver. I think that's really important, and it came out in recent years that we need procedures how to do this without making it feel like a procedure, of course. Fun. So we tried to meet outside GitHub. We did a 1-week developer retreat in the Swiss Alps last year where we would meet with 11 people for a whole week developing something together, work on the project together, and have a few adventures, go hiking and stuff like that, to build up these personal tie friendships, have something doing together. We run a Signal channel, and the only thing we do on Signal is making jokes about pineapple pizza, I think. And that is it's only for fun purposes, but it creates cohesion within the project. And there's all these sorts of insider jokes and sets up an insider group, and it's so much fun people to be part out of it. So we're outside the daily constraints in your commercial company. We're a safe space where you can meet your friends without a boss looking over your shoulders. And you can do funny or idiotic things as much as you want, and nobody cares, as long as it's fun for everybody. Transparency. We're an open source project. Transparency is our DNA, and we want to be as open, as accessible as possible. I've come to see the last few years, 1 or 2 years actually, there is always a drive to be no longer transparent, to take discussions behind the curtain. And it's important to always know, let's push this out. This should be in public. Just keep the really, really secret, confidential things, the dirty laundry don't wash in public, for example. Keep that behind the curtain. But the rest, our chat archives are published. Everybody should be able to understand why we're doing something. At times it's hard to understand, but if you have the archive, how we discussed about it, that's actually useful. So we want to be as open and accessible and inviting for newcomers as possible, because again, we want to attract people to donate their time to our project. We try to do a lot of our decisions, all of our decisions if possible, via consensus. We're not driven by hard timing and schedules. So we're all on equal level, at least on the technical level, we're all equals, and we discuss things. And we have learned that very often the timing isn't right for a decision. It's better to let it rest for a couple of weeks until we take a decision, and then once it sets, then people start to realize, understand each other's arguments, and then we're able to settle a discourse in a very friendly way. I think we have never really forced a hard decision that could rip the project apart, because if you end up with 2 factions in your project, I mean, the worst thing would be to have somebody fork over a tiny technical detail. That would be idiotic. It's better to let it rest and revisit. And as I've also learned personally, the solution that we finally agreed on was much better than my initial idea, just because we let it rest for a couple of weeks, a month. At times, it takes half a year until we have a solution to something that we're not quite happy with, but we don't really know how to improve it. So we slowly approach it with analysis and reports, and then talk about again, until we have a joint view of this. And all this together, the course of 15 years, is coming together in something which I think is very beautiful. It's a flourishing project. It's a blossoming, come on, clicker. It's a blossoming project that is, for me, very beautiful to work within. And I think it looks very beautiful from outside. It's a group of friends coming together as developers to do what they really love to do with all their passion, writing very strong security rules into a beautiful code base that they share for free on the internet, and naturally a community outside that uses our stuff, that loves our stuff on their web applications to secure them for the better and the better security of the internet. Thank you very much. I think we have exactly 5 minutes for questions. That was perfect timing, wasn't it?
Perfect. And I had a lot to learn from your talk. Thank you. So questions?
Did I stun you?
If there's no questions, I have one.
Yes, please.
So I had a difficulty of, you mentioned that the sponsorship is important, but kind of pricing their contribution might be a little bit difficult. How do you, so they do it on their own motivation usually, but you provide some kind of money to them. So how do you kind of balance them?
With developers or with the sponsors?
With developers. So
Okay.
some get paid, some
No, they're usually not paid. Okay,
Not paid.
But that's a very good question. So we're a volunteer-driven project, and we want to be a volunteer-driven project. And then suddenly money comes into the game. And once money is on the table, it gets really risky. I think this is really dangerous for the project to accept money. And you want to share the money within the project, but you don't want to get into a situation where people envy each other over the money they're getting. So far the policy has been we're financing fringe activities around, support questions on Twitter in their spare time. Yeah, we finance that. You coach a Google Summer of Code student in your spare time next to the project. We pay you for the coaching more than Google is paying you. We do an annual developer retreat in Switzerland. We pay the trip, we pay the hotel, we pay the food, we pay all the activities, of course. But you provide a better regular expression in our rule set. You do this for free. And so far, that has been the rule. However, with the success of our sponsorship project now and the large amount of work that we need to do, we might have to revise this. One approach could be, and this is very new now, is to think about when we have security findings and we run a bug bounty project this spring, a big integrator spent several $100,000 paying to security researchers to report findings to us. So the researchers got a lot of money, somebody paid that, and we get to have the work for free. And we're now in a situation that we're overwhelmed with these bypasses. These are special patterns working around the rule set. And it's very unthankful to improve these regular expressions, but we could try to divide this work a bit and do part of this work pay for somebody. That could be an approach, but it would be a revision of this rule where we say, hey, the core center of our work is still volunteer-driven. But this might have to change. I'm trying to talk to all the developers. How do you feel about this? Look, there was a security researcher, and looking at the numbers, he apparently bought a new car from what he got from this bug bounty. How do you feel about this? Because for you, it's a spare time. You could buy a new house with that money. And most of our developers are easier about this than I am. I think, hey, money on the table makes everything complicated. And to say, hey, it's beneficial for a project. I still enjoy the project anyway. And it's not my money, so I don't care. So they feel quite at ease, but I'm very sensitive about money in the game. It's just something, if we want to grow and pursue the ideas we have with the project, then money is kind of necessary. We couldn't meet without somebody paying the trip.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting. So no other question? Then please join me thanking Christian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please remember to fill the survey in your mobile app. And the next talk is in 10 minutes from 4:50. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.